Okay, we got Ben Fowler. It's just great to have you join me today and talk a little bit about a new venture that you're in the middle of. And I'm going to say you're a PGA professional. Yes, you are in sort of the RSV status, but you and I, Ben, we went to New Mexico State a long, long time ago. I had a lot of hair then and no facial hair. That was a long time ago, 20 something, 27, 28 years ago. And I think that's where we met. I don't honestly remember when I met you at New Mexico State. It had to be in some class. And I don't really remember. Maybe it was at the golf
Class or
course.
maybe it might have been a PGM tournament. Wouldn't surprise
Yeah,
me.
it
Exactly
was.
remember the day, but yeah, yeah.
Lots happened since then. A lot of good things. So part of that was that we also got to work at the PGA of America together in starting in 2012. And any memories of that sort of experience that you'd want to share? Not necessarily working with me, of course, but just working with PGA of America and how that helped you become who you are today.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think, a really neat time because I started with you at PGA of America pretty much the same time. And it was really at the onset of Golf 2.0. So, right then, the PGA of America hired nine player development regional managers and national manager. Many of those people I'm still very good friends with today, personally. So, a lot of really good people. And yeah, I mean, I would say probably that was like kind of the neatest thing is that a lot of really passionate people for the game of golf who I consider friends, we got to work together with. So
Yeah. And the interesting part there was, I think, was it was so in some ways kind of like what you're kind of doing now. It was so out, like there was no boundary, there was no real defined where what we were doing. I remember the first year or two, it was kind of a little bit about get golf ready, but other than that, it was, hey, get out there and inspire people
hmm
to grow the game. How are we going to do that? Not really sure. Get it done. And actually, so it was kind of like
yeah,
we kind of wrote our own playbook. Yeah.
inspiring golf professionals to create new golfers.
It's all about helping them have a better job, a better opportunity, hopefully better compensation, more job stability, and more satisfaction actually for what they do. One of the things that you did highlights wise that some people probably may not know is you wrote a playbook called Know Your Customer that was exceptionally well done, and it probably didn't get enough play at the time, and it should. It's still a resource that it's a new customer now, but it still was really good. And then
hmm
obviously the one about that was focused on women uh,
hmm
was really well done as well. Tell us a little bit about what you did with NGF before the PGA of America, and then also what you did with PGA Learning Centers and that development concept.
Yeah, so my role at PGA of America was to essentially be the primary analyst for golf participation data. So I helped kind of be an internal resource to you and other player development regional managers to help understand demand for golf in the area. I know, I mean, I spent a fair amount of time at one time dissecting the work of the Boston Consulting Group, and they did a pretty heavy model for projecting out golf demand. And then as I transitioned into the PGA Learning Centers, which was a very cool joint venture with the PGA of America and the PGA Tour, that was something that I worked extensively with Ted Eleftheriou on. And we had some really good people. It was, I think, a really good concept. Unfortunately, we just didn't really have the right sites to make everything go the way we would have liked. But it was a very neat time, and I think it's a lot of that thought and work could be future.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's interesting too is that some people maybe pull back the curtain a little bit with the PGA of America is that because it's a member driven organization and it's driven with officers and boards, it tends to be wavy, like, hey, let's do this. And
Yeah.
often it's really great ideas. And there have been some that are really great ideas that have but then there's others where it's kind of like, oh, let's do this. And then it's sort of like 2 years later, there's a new president and maybe the support's not there, or now somebody in sort of the C-suite isn't there to, in so many words, stand up for it in the budget meetings and to define it. Because I know one of the things that you built, I thought was always thought was pretty incredible, is you figured out a way to have the tracking of the player's behavior at a public municipal golf course in the LA County, their spend actually show up and be tracked in point of sale, so you could actually have really good data, as opposed to sort of, well, we think they spend about $1,200. It was like, no, we know to the penny and what they're spending. You kind of figured out a way with Ted and Mike O'Donnell from Campbell River in Canada, that Mike O'Donnell, you guys figured out a way, and it was very important because then you could prove your value. You were on track for that, and actually, I think maybe you undersold some of your facilities. You had enough facilities that were actually making the money. They were actually
Yeah.
doing it. They were net positive, and yeah, there was
Yeah.
a few dogs, but there's always a few dogs. It's just how life works.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
at some point, I think maybe when that happened, I think that's about the time that maybe I started to go to career consulting, but maybe a little bit before that. But there was a point where you were kind of like, a little bit. It was kind of a bad beat, like, wow, I just did all this work, and you're going to turn it off. That's too bad. And then it was kind of like, well, what do I do now? And that about the time when you started to think, I want to go get my master's in data science. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it was. So back at that time, it was in 2016, I just thought, I'm doing all this work on analysis. I've started to do some statistical modeling. So I had built a statistical regression model to predict how profitable each site was going to be for the PGA Learning Centers, which I actually had quite quite accurate. But I didn't have any type of formal education in data analytics or data science. And I thought, I think I need to get educated in that space. And this was back in 2016. At the time, there were only, to my knowledge, I think 3 universities that offered Master of Science in Data Science, which is crazy. Like, that was not that long ago. I mean, that was 8 years ago. There was
Yeah.
only 3, and there's now there's thousands. I mean, there are a dime a dozen. So
Yeah.
I would say, in some ways, I think looking back on life, sometimes it's good to be first. My timing was probably pretty good to do that. And
Yeah.
just before graduation, I went to work for a startup. I was offered a role as a senior data scientist with a company called CarePredict. We made a wearable device we sold to assisted living and senior care facilities. It was a great opportunity for me to actually start doing the work of a data scientist in my full-time job. And
Yeah.
that was something I kind of needed, and that was the right move for me at that point.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me about it because again, we're always checking in, and then at one point you went to work for what you described as the fifth largest car auto finance company in the world, behind it like
Hmm.
countries.
Yeah, 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 yeah. To work
Amazing.
for JM Family, which is the parent company, and Southeast Toyota, which is the distributor for Toyotas in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and Southeast Toyota Finance, which does all the financing at all those dealerships. So we had a lot of data, and I worked there for about 5 years, and it was a really good
Yeah.
experience. Learned a lot.
That was about the time that you started to really understand machine learning, and you really started to sort of say, how can I be part of that? And almost basically, I remember in so many words, for layman terms,
Hmm.
you built a code, a spreadsheet where it could basically decide whether I get a car loan or not, if I
Hmm.
without having a human
Yeah,
have to check it.
exactly. Yeah, that was like one of my bigger projects there, was to help automate the process of loan originations and reduce human review.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say I got better with machine learning, a lot better there. It's just built on it. And it's interesting because it's like the more time you spend in this field, the less your work years ago is relevant today. Like the
Hmm.
things that I did at Care Predict, like even like the software tools that I use in the libraries, I don't really use much of that anymore.
Hmm.
That's just maybe a statement of how fast the field is evolving. Like when I was at Care Predict, we used AWS, and like I was doing a lot of stuff on my local laptop. Like now, for my work laptop, you can pretty much give me a pretty junky laptop because I don't do any work on that. Everything's on the cloud. So there's
Hmm.
no compute that's needed from there. So those are like kind of small things that
Yeah.
like kind of it's just evolved. So
Yeah. That's interesting. So sort of breaking to a different area now. When did you start to think about how you could utilize AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning? When did you start to think that maybe there was a way that you could create a way for yourself and potentially other people to get better at golf through the use of that? Like, how did that? What was the genesis of that?
So that's a really great question. So in business, and a lot of people are probably now familiar in the business world with a tool called ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is, we would call a UI or user interface that's on the web. It's an application that someone can go to and enter text as a chat bot. But it's not like a dumb chat bot like you've used with companies in the past, where like it, and a lot of companies, they have their chat bots that are kind of infuriating. Like if you're trying to get like maybe money back from an airline or something like that, or
Yeah.
it's not very intelligent. When ChatGPT came out, this was in, I believe it was November 2022. For me, it was just a really very eye-opening moment, because like there was almost a bit of shock. And even like for my manager at my current company, he didn't believe it. He's like, no, there's no way this can be that good. And then like finally, and it's taken him time to get there. Like finally he's like, now I would say is fully on board, and it's changed the way I would say every single person at my current company, the way we work. We work very differently now with the advent of generative AI versus before. Before software development, you had to understand exactly how all the methods were used for calling different types of functions, and how you structured your code, and do you put a comma here, or do you put a colon here? Do you use a straight brace, or do you use a curly brace? And those types of elements and the way you wrote out the code were very important. And in some ways, it's almost now with the advent of generative AI, it's made that aspect less important, but you have to know A, what you're trying to do, and B, you have to be smart enough to know that the answer you're getting back could be wrong, and you need to be careful and check it. So it's not, definitely is not perfect, and the state of I think AI today is definitely not perfect. You can see Tesla and their vision of autonomous cars, which may never happen, but it is still a really great technological achievement. So to answer your question, I've been very excited about this area for some time, and it actually came to me recently of how AI could help me play better golf on a chipping green several months ago. I was trying to hit some chip shots and just was not making solid contact with the golf ball. And after about 30 to 40 minutes on the chipping green and still just not getting consistent contact, a thought just came to my head. It's just like, what if you just hold the golf club with just your left hand only and just hit a couple chip shots just with left-handed? And lo and behold, I started hitting it better. Like, I mean, better one-handed than with two hands. It was like, that's interesting. Like, okay, I can hit chip shots better one-handed than two hands. Okay. So then I thought, all right, well then maybe this is telling me something. Like, what if I then grab the golf club with my right hand and have almost no pressure on my right hand, just literally just have it along for the ride and let the left hand swing the golf club and continue to hit really good chip shots. And so I thought that's kind of interesting. And the other thing that's even interesting too is like not even long distances, say a 40-foot chip shot, I could noticeably detect the ball flight being lower. So I kind of thought, okay, so maybe I got a little bit of forward shaft lean going on here now. And so I thought to myself, I think I'm going to try to give AI a really good one. So I'm going to try to stump ChatGPT, and I'm going to ask it the question from a golf teaching perspective: why would it be more beneficial to have more grip pressure in your left hand than in your right hand if you're a right-handed golfer when trying to hit chip or pitch shots? And it gave me essentially like a 4-paragraph answer. And it was, from my opinion, I thought it was pretty much dead on. It talked about having the left hand acting as a guide through the club to help control swing plane and control the club face. It would help prevent flipping at the golf balls to reduce the likelihood of thin or fat shots. It would help promote forward shaft lean. And so these answers I thought were all kind of interesting. And I thought, all right, well, I'll try to trick it and I'll ask it the inverse. For a right-handed golfer, why would it be better to have more pressure in your right hand than the left hand? And it basically came back to me. It's like, there's no good reason why you'd want to do that. I was like, all right, that's interesting. And so like this idea of having varying grip pressure between your left and right hands for a right-handed golfer and like a chip or a pitch shot is probably something that's not that intuitive to the average golfer. And so I kind of thought that's a pretty advanced concept that it's distilled for me. And so at that point, I thought, it would be really interesting now that I know that generative AI can detect advanced swing concepts. Can it then analyze video? And can it take, say, a video of an iPhone and analyze pixels in that video and identify strengths and weaknesses in my golf swing and give me essentially a golf lesson? And after some work, that's what I built, and it's neat.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is I've demoed it and got value out of it as well. One of the things that I think is pretty cool is like it can capture an unedited down the line from behind for the layman or face on, and it can capture that and it can edit it. Your code can edit it to where it doesn't waste a bunch of memory. It just goes, okay, you're at address, top of the swing, impact, past impact, boom.
Yeah, I mean, the golf swing is typically 1.3 to 1.8 seconds. We're not talking a long period of time from address to follow through. It's not a long period of time, and being really efficient with that's important. Because if you're giving the AI just the essential image frames to analyze, you're going to get a better lesson.
Yeah, and then also too, I think what's exceptional about it is that yes, it does do that. I did it with myself. It does distill in the images that it captures like three or four in the backswing and at impact, and then a few after as still photos, which I didn't expect that. I thought that was really cool. But part of that is that I'm looking at that as a PGA professional with my eyes, my experience of coaching potentially 1,000 plus. I wouldn't say I'm 10,000 different people, but at least 1,000. And then working with juniors in various ages and all kinds of stuff, being ADM, American Development Model trained. So like I have the eyes to see it, but also one of the things that I immediately saw was for somebody who's learning how to be a teacher, it could be hey, you want to check your work? You want to check your eyes, see if you're actually seeing? I can't imagine that any PGA professional wouldn't actually be like, oh, well, that's additional information I didn't pick up. And do I need to share it with the golfer? No, because that's one of the things that I think is what truly great teaching professionals do is they have restraint. They know when to not say certain things because they know that they're basically going to blow up the brain of their golfer because their golfer can't focus on a bunch of different issues. And so like that's one of the things that I see is super important with the tool is I think I gave the analogy when I told you it's like, hey, you just handed me the keys to an F1 car. Not that F1 cars have a key. Let's be
Yeah.
honest. I know this. They need, it takes sometimes an hour to start an F1 car. It's a lot faster with PlayIQ. But if you were to set me with the whole fire suit and and I could actually get into one of these F1 cars or even an F2 car, F3 car. If I could get into one of those cars and you said, all right, let her go, I probably wouldn't be able to get it out of first gear. And if I did, I might hurt myself bad because of the
Yeah.
horsepower and the lack of grip that you get from all that torque. And so to a certain extent, I think that what you've built for the layman golfer is very helpful and very useful. But I think it's in concert with a PGA professional who might also have a Gary Gray functional movement expert or a TPI person or somebody else who can help this person understand how they can start to get better rotation or fix flexibility addition. You can actually start to work on that. I think that there's a real chance to do this and to make it work. So what are some of the things that you would say in terms of your vision and why you aren't just going to the masses and saying, hey, I'm going to bypass the PGA professional, don't care about them? Why do you think it's important for PlayIQ to be in a collaborative way, sort of partnering? You want pros, PGA professionals, and facilities that employ those professionals to collaborate and see PlayIQ as a tool to help them grow their business and actually be perhaps better.
100%. Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
So there's a few areas to that question that I want to kind of talk about. So one is about me being a PGA member reserve, we'll call it, since 2003, and I'm definitely interested in coming back in a membership. PGA of America has been a really important organization in my life. My father-in-law was a past PGA of America president. I'm friends with many people who work in the PGA of America at different sections. I went to New Mexico State's PGM program. So I'd say that's part of my answer. The other part is just my knowledge of the golf industry. I think the best way to grow the game of golf and get more people engaged in the sport, which I think golf is the greatest game, is through the golf professional. There's things that an AI can never do to replace or replicate what a PGA golf professional does. The PGA golf professional knows how to relate to the student based on what type of learner are you? Are you visual? Are you kinesthetic? Are you auditory? PGA golf professional can put hands on the student, say, this is what flat feels like, this is what steep feels like, and let the golfer actually have that feeling that he's trying to convey that you may not be able to grasp as well if you're watching a YouTube video, per se. That's part of my answer. But then the other part of my answer is most people who play golf don't take lessons. According to the National Golf Foundation numbers, only 15% of people take lessons. I think that's high. Based on my gut instinct, I think it's probably closer to 5% of people take lessons. I think it's a pretty low number. There's 45 million people in America that are playing the game of golf, and you say 5% are taking lessons, that's about 43 million people just in the US who don't take lessons.
I would say one of the things too about your gut versus the average person's gut, your gut is usually very well. It's a very scientific swag, scientifically wild guess, right? It's usually your gut is
Yeah.
usually supported. I remember some of the things about NGF that you shared with me, and I still share to this day about Net Promoter Score. And it's so true. If you can change the number of people who are Net Promoter Scores up, and you can reduce the number of people who can't stand you and are toxic, well, yeah, you're going to make more money, and that's obvious. But you could do it. You could actually give us a real number that was legit. So
Yeah.
your gut's usually on point.
So there's a lot of people who don't take lessons. And if you think about it from the why, I don't want to go to money because I actually think golf professionals generally are probably underpaid for lessons. I still think that. Like, I think their
100%.
time as being an expert as a teacher is worth more than $80 an hour. I think that's low. So I don't know what the number is. Should it be $200, $300 an hour? But I think generally that's a low number. So I don't want to say pay is the reason, but I do think one area that is probably challenging for golfers is around the prospect of lessons is comfort. There's some people who just are not comfortable with the idea of having someone watch them hit balls and give them a lesson. And then also too, people may have taken lessons in the past and maybe it just didn't click with them. And for whatever reason, the teacher that they're working with, they didn't improve. Maybe they regressed and they just didn't get what they were saying and maybe didn't stick with it. They got frustrated and they just gave up. And so I think for the vast majority of golfers, not taking lessons is a really poor idea. And golf intuitively is not an easy game to play. And if you're trying to figure it out by reading Golf Digest articles or watching Golf Channel, yes, that instruction is all technically correct, but it may not be technically correct for you.
If I can kind of go back a little bit, I think you're right about potentially for some people taking a lesson with someone watching, but also generally sometimes you're taking a lesson. It's a little bit different now because of some of the studios that are available. They're more private, but the idea for some people of I'm going to take a lesson on the range with other people who are going to observe me. In reality, let's be honest, most people aren't watching someone take a lesson because they're busy with their own life. But the perception is wow, if I shank it or if I hit a bad shot, everyone's going to see me, and they're going to realize that I suck, and they're going to. And it's that pressure. Reality is most people aren't even paying attention. It's the way it is on the first tee. Maybe a little bit people watch, but only if they're your buddies. Really, they know you. The rest of the time, they're not really paying attention. But the perception is that people feel that way, and then I think too, it's time. I remember someone saying to me that and it didn't dawn on me, and I've used this as a coaching thing, but I didn't really leverage it when I was an active green grass golf professional. But I only get Thursday afternoon to play golf with my buddies. And if I spend that time with you, I won't get to spend time with them. So I'm going to make the sort of I'm going to make a value decision, say, I'd rather suck and spend time with my friends than give up some time with my friends so I can get better and beat my friends. And so, but it dawned on me like, hey, let's have a lab and let's get all your friends into a coaching environment and let's help you all get better. And then we'll move forward together. Let's go on the golf course and do a 4-person playing lesson. Let's do stuff like that. So that's what I would do now based on my sort of professional education. But at the time, I didn't have that. And so like I think that the other thing that potentially I see also value is it actually makes in terms of efficacy of the time of the PGA professional, they can actually help more people because I think you and I both would agree that an hour lesson may not be the best use of anybody's time. Gus Jones, my mentor, likes to say, once you learn how to teach and you really know what you're doing and you have a good eye, he's like, I can help somebody in 8 to 12 minutes. After that, I'm just a cheerleader. And so like, why be out there for an hour? Because also too, that's when the pro has to show restraint, like not,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so now we've talked about this situation, Ben, let's
Mm-hmm.
switch to this. And you're
Let's
like,
do this. You're overloaded. Yeah.
yeah,
Boom. Yeah.
in about
Yeah.
in at minute 15 the student is, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And that's I
Yeah.
think where a lot of maybe some of those sort of negative experiences that people have had, and then also the idea that too is potentially is it's really, I mean, the best teachers always, coaches always sort of taught me that your job is not going back to that Formula One or race car analogy. It's to help you know how to drive, take you to the Bob Bondurant racing
Mm-hmm.
school, and then you check in, and it's like
Yeah.
when the car's not cornering well, I can figure out why and I can address it with a little help from my coach, but I don't actually have to go rebuild the car. I can live with it. So how would you say your sort of ideal situation would be, for a facility to utilize PlayIQ.ai as a platform with their golf professionals and then make that work? What were some of the sort of
Yeah.
best
So
case or sort
I
of
would say a
starting
couple
scenarios
things.
that make
So
sense to you?
I would say a couple things. Like one would be for the PGA Golf Professional to utilize PlayIQ as an instructor. So we have an instructor offering where essentially the instructor can then identify who their students are. They can add a student into the system, use it for their lesson. And then I would say where PlayIQ can be beneficial is kind of be that check-in tool for the student between lessons. So the student could then subscribe to PlayIQ, be able to use the service, and ensure that they're on track with what they're working on with the instructor. I've got a few ideas that are kind of percolating right now that aren't built into the system yet. One of which that I'm working on right now is to allow a student to basically create an account, a subscription, and then recall their past lessons and images that they took while they were a student of the instructor. So if the instructor has them in the system, then they create an account. All that information will still be there. But then also, too, for the golf professional's perspective, I think many golf professionals do not look at the same swing the same way. I actually just got into a spirited discussion with one of your colleagues, Monty, and it was in the topic of head drop. And his response back to me was, I don't know if I agree with the lesson coming back to me telling me I'm dropping my head too much. You can think of Tiger Woods. It was a power source it can be a power source in the swing.
Yeah.
Tiger Woods in his prime, his head dropped. And I wrote back to him and I said, all true and I agree, but I will caveat that when I was a junior golfer, I took lessons from Craig Harmon, who's a legend of the PGA. And I
Yeah.
vividly remember Craig Harmon working with me, drawing lines on an old TV screen, saying, here's your head at the start of the swing. This is how much it's dropping, and working on preventing head drop. So if you just take a topic such as like dropping, is your head dropping
Yeah.
on the downswing or not? Some people may look at it and say, that's great. I love it. I'm good with it. Other people might say, who are also experts at golf instruction, and say, I don't like the way that looks, and I want to adjust that.
Yeah.
And so where I'm going with this is I'm kind of been thinking about a way that the golf professional can impart their own beliefs into the AI. And so that's actually something that I'm thinking about too. So
Hmm.
either have a philosophy section from the Golf Professional, or even on the student module, basically say, I want to focus in on these specific areas in the lesson and maybe not so much in these other areas. So that's some things that I'm kind of thinking about. So that's like
Yeah.
one area.
One of the things that I think that you said that I like is also, I think the average student doesn't understand. If we go back to sort of the engagement pathway, there's people who are intro to golf and they're thinking, I want
Mhm.
to see if I might like this game. And then there's the social recreational golfer who basically would say, I play this game for social reasons. Don't actually, yeah, I want to get better, but I'm not really willing to invest the time and the effort into getting better necessarily because I'm doing it for social reasons. Like I play in the hit and giggle type things and fun things, but and then there's the person who sort of says, okay, I want to make this transition from being a social golfer to being a committed golfer, I
Mhm.
think is the word we used, or engaged. And the difference there is now I'm engaging with a PGA professional who, and where the breakdown often happens is the person doesn't realize that they're saying, I'm going to engage with a coach who, and part of the coach's job is to kick me in the rear end occasionally or give me a pat philosophically on the head
Mhm.
or on the back and say, you need to practice more. You need to play
Mhm.
between lessons. You need to invest
Mhm.
time into this if you want to get better. And the person at their particular life, in some cases, they realize, I don't have the time. I have a young son named Leon. I have a young son named, or a daughter named Darcy, or whatever it is, and and like I don't have the time to invest in that. In effect, they resign themselves to, I guess I'll just always be a social recreational golfer, or they basically don't do the work between lessons. So they get lesson
Mhm.
here, work on your grip, work on your setup, and then 7 to 10 days later, they come back to their pro and they haven't touched a club. What's the pro going to do? The pro's going to work on the same thing. They can't do something value added if they haven't fixed their grip because it's still the same problem. And obviously, it takes time to fix the grip. But what you've got, I think the other benefit is it might be a month between lessons. So now it becomes this true check in of I can actually send my pro a quick deal and I might work with my pro who maybe I'm up in Long Island as a golf pro and that's where the members at, but then in the wintertime they go down to medalist like we're used to intern or
Mhm.
wherever it is, and
Yep.
they don't see their pro for a while. Well, they could interact with the pro the whole
Absolutely.
time and kind of keep getting those check-ins. So I think that that's huge value potentially to the golf professional. And in theory, as they interact, does that not mean that the pro gets paid for their time? I think it does. And
Yeah.
it's also time well spent. So for the customer, the consumer should feel like that's worthwhile to me because I am
Mhm.
progressing, even though I'm traveling, even though I'm not physically able to get in front of this individual.
So I think my vision is 100% that base of customers at the facility who are engaged in teaching. But then for all the customers who at the facility who are not engaged in teaching, this can be a great tool to get the golfers more competent, a little more comfortable at the golf course, playing a little bit better. And if you're playing better golf and you're more comfortable, we know you're going to be more engaged. You're going to want to play more. You're going to be at the facility more often, and just by doing that, just by playing more rounds of golf, being on the range more, talking to your friends, playing with your friends more, you're going to be more likely to actually then advance into PGA Golf Professional instruction.
Yeah.
And that is actually the greatest opportunity for a golf professional to grow their lesson book is with all the people who aren't taking lessons with them, not the people who they're already giving lessons to. You're probably not going to necessarily going to be able to get that many more lessons out of your current customers, but most of the customers at the facility you probably are not teaching. And if you could get, say, another 50 or 100 students from the facility who aren't taking lessons with you and get them to take 4 or 5 lessons, that's a massive impact to your lesson book. And to me, that's the greatest opportunity to drive the golf professional's compensation is if your lesson book is full, then you're probably able to raise your rates.
I would
And
say too.
and that's what everyone wants.
I always like talking to you. Always have because we're we're both passionate about the same things. Obviously, we're both wired a little bit differently, but I think it's complementary. I think I could see myself as an operator saying to you, Ben, can you help me generate sort of a link where it's a QR code snapshot. It's on the range. It's basically Monte the golf professional or one of my staff. Would you like a free lesson? And they go there and they do this and they click on it and there's instructions that say, okay, here's how we want you to record your lesson through this PlayIQ. And we
Mm-hmm.
want you to do this. This is a complimentary thing we're providing. And it's basically generates a report for me as the pro. It doesn't go directly
Mm-hmm.
to them. And then it's like, okay, thanks for sending me that video. Here's what I see that I can help you with. Would you like to schedule a sort of review of that and an actual live lesson to talk about application? And the person might go, well, no commitment. I don't have to commit to anything. I can just
Yeah.
do that. I also think
Yeah.
too, the reality is having a full lesson book where you're interacting. If I'm a board member at a club, an officer at a club, an owner at public daily fee golf course, or a management company, I actually don't want my golf professional to work with 9 people in a day. I want them to work with 20 people in a day, maybe 25, where it's instead of, again, those 1 hour, one person, it's like, no, I want to de incentivize that. I want to see you work with, if it's 1-to-1, it's maximum 30 minutes, maybe 20. Because if you're really good, you
Yep.
should be able to help them in 20 minutes.
Yep.
And now this whole idea of interacting and engaging with people, the more you do that, the more those people, if you're at a private club, keep
Well,
paying
heck,
dues.
I mentioned Craig Harmon when I was a junior golfer. So his program to non-members at Oak Hill back in the day was, he called it, I believe it was his Golf Plus lesson program, and it was him and an assistant golf professional, and it was group lessons. There was four people in the lesson, so you'd have four. He'd work with one student, and then his assistant would work with the other three to make sure that they're working on the drill. So you'd want, and he'd literally give of that. I think it was an hour, but of that hour, you might have 10 minutes of his time. But then the other 50 minutes of the time, you got the assistant there. He's watching, making sure you're doing the drills the way
Yeah.
you are. And that's kind of what you're talking about. You've now just
Yeah.
touched 4 people in an hour. In 8 hours, you've touched, instead of 8 people, you've touched 32 people. So,
But in terms of, I think as we wrap up, that value is also too, is if you wanted that pro's time for an hour, it should be, we've talked about this analogy of, it needs to be a limo experience and it needs to be charged like a limo experience. And most people, and that's, I think, where the value, the money question comes in, is that's why most pros don't charge enough. But if it's going to be that 4-to-1 ratio, well, now, or 8-to-1 ratio, it's a party bus. It's really a social experience. And in some ways, for the social golfer, it might be the bridge that they need to get into instruction and to realize, oh, this is helpful to my game, because it doesn't cost me that much. And oh, by the way, even if I don't get better, I'm still going to have fun. I'm
mhm,
still going to interact with
yeah.
people just like I would if I was playing golf or I was at a tailgate or whatever.
One thing I did want to
Okay.
stop you on, though. You mentioned this QR code in the range. Another way that a facility could use PlayIQ would be with the starter. Like literally, you have the perfect video man in the starter who's just watching the group tee off on that first hole. Boom, take a downline video of that golfer and then send that lesson via the email functionality to the golf professional's email address, and boom, like the golfer gets a really great lesson that's emailed to them before they're even hitting their second shot on the first hole, and then
Hmm.
the golf professional
Yeah.
has a warm
Yeah.
lead.
Actually, I think that's a really cool idea. And
It's
all
an
you need
interesting
is
idea.
basically if you were taking lessons from Craig Harmon back in the day and he said, hey, Ben, instead of charging you for the coaching, here's what I'm going to have you do. I need you for 4 hours on Saturday morning. I need you to do this. I'm going to set you up. I'm going to give you the camera. I'm going to show you how to do it and load it up. And for that, I'm going to take care of you. Like I'm going to barter some time. And like that'd be easy. And the kid would be like, "This is cool," and you might realize, "Well, that's how I want. I might want to be a golf pro. That's cool what you're doing." So that's a
Yeah.
really good idea. So in terms of someone finding out more about PlayIQ.ai, how do they go about that?
Yeah, that's our website. So go to playiq.ai,
Yep.
and there's a sign up
And
page. You can try it out. There's a free weekly trial on different types of subscription offerings. The silver package is a free week trial. You can also just buy a single lesson for $8. So it's not a high barrier to entry to try it out. If you're a golf professional, I would say, and you're interested in learning more, reach out to me or you, Monty, and you can get them connected to me,
Yep.
and I'd be happy to tell them and spend more time. As a PGA Golf Professional, I definitely want to spend more time with them so they can understand more what we're about.
Okay, well, great. I appreciate your time today. Next time I think maybe I'd like to talk with you again at another window where we can actually just talk about some testimonials from actual students who have found value out of it, besides me and besides you. Perhaps even some PGA professionals, some stories that you've heard from people like us who have found ways to utilize your platform to A, grow their business, and B, help their golfers find more satisfaction from the lesson, increase the net promoter score of the value of taking golf instruction from them. Very
Sure,
much.
I'd love that. Yeah.
We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Monty.